Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the world of the Los Angeles mega mansion. It's a world of absolutely unimaginable luxury, sure, but it's also a story of intense neighborhood conflict and, as it turns out, colossal financial risk. Behind all that shimmering glass and those incredible infinity pools, there's a fascinating story of ambition clashing with community, and of a city that was finally forced to say, enough is enough. So, let's dive in.
Our story really kicks off with this one, single, absolutely staggering number. $295 million. For a moment there, that was the real asking price for a property that had become a legend in Los Angeles, long before anyone ever set foot inside. It was a place known simply, and maybe a little arrogantly, as The One. And look, that wasn't just a price tag, it was a statement. It was a declaration that a new king of real estate had arrived on a Bel Air hilltop, ready to look down on everyone else.
And to even begin to wrap your head around that price, you have to understand the sheer mind-bending scale we're talking about here. 105,000 square feet of interior space. I mean, that's not a home, that's a private resort. To put it in perspective for you, it's more than twice the size of the White House. You could fit an entire NFL football field inside this thing and still have room left over. We're talking about an ambition not just to build a house, but to build a modern-day landmark.
And the features inside? They're just as absurdly over the top. You've got 21 bedrooms, which is basically a boutique hotel. But this next number, this is where reality just kind of gets left behind. 49 bathrooms. Yeah, you heard me right. 49. It's a level of excess so extreme it almost becomes an abstract concept. I mean, who could possibly need 49 bathrooms? But you see, asking that question means you're missing the point. The point was never about utility. The point was just to have more than anyone else, to create a spectacle of statistics.
This quote from when it was first listed really says it all, doesn't it? For a time, The One wasn't just another mansion. It was the undisputed champion, a monument to an era of what seemed like limitless money and completely unrestrained development. But as we'll see, that era was about to have some very real consequences. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide.
And that right there brings us to the core conflict of this whole story. Because for every person who looked up at this mansion and saw an aspirational dream, there were hundreds of neighbors who were living through the decade-long reality of its construction. You know, the constant noise, the convoys of cement trucks clogging up these narrow, winding roads, the sheer audacity of a project that was literally reshaping a mountain. So it raises this central question: what happens when one person's ultimate dream becomes an entire neighborhood's living nightmare?
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at the impossible creation of The One. Then, we'll zoom out and examine the neighborhood impact that projects like this were having all over the city. From there, we'll see how Los Angeles was basically forced to draw a line in the sand with new laws, which made The One the very last of its kind. Then we'll shift gears a bit and see how this billionaire dream can turn into a financial and legal nightmare. And finally, we'll ask, what does the future of extreme luxury even look like in this new, more regulated world? Okay, so let's start with Act 1, the impossible creation. See, to really get why a house like this can never ever be built again in Los Angeles, you first have to appreciate just how unbelievably extreme it was. This wasn't just building a house, it was an epic construction saga that played out over 10 years, becoming this constant source of speculation and controversy in the city.
Now, this is where it gets really wild, when you break down the sheer fantasy of it all. So forget the 21 bedrooms for a second. This place had a full-scale private nightclub with its own VIP area. The master suite alone was 5,000 square feet. That's bigger than most people's entire house. The garage was basically a private car museum for 50 vehicles. It had its own 4-lane bowling alley, a 40-seat movie theater, a full-service salon, even a 400-foot jogging trail that wraps around the property. And to make all this possible, to carve out a big enough flat pad on this hilltop, crews had to remove nearly 30,000 cubic yards of dirt. It was literally an act of engineering a mountain.
This quote from one of the listing agents just captures it perfectly. It's how people in LA started to think about this project. It stopped being just a house. It became this legendary entity looming on the hill. It was a symbol of a new gilded age, a massive conversation piece, a landmark of an era where it really seemed, just for a moment, like there were no limits at all. But those limits, they were approaching fast. Now, The One was obviously the most extreme example, but it wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was really the peak of a trend that was causing serious problems all across Los Angeles. A trend that got a name: mansionization.
So, what exactly is mansionization?
Well, the city of LA defines it like this: the rapid spread of single-family homes that are just completely out of scale with the neighborhoods they're being dropped into. And this wasn't just some aesthetic complaint, about a boxy modern home replacing a charming older one. No, this was about the real, tangible, day-to-day impacts: years of construction noise, giant trucks blocking narrow hillside roads, a total loss of privacy for neighbors, and just a fundamental change in the whole character of these established communities.
And this is a really key point. The push for change didn't come from some planner in an office downtown. It came from the ground up. It was frustrated residents, powerful homeowner associations, and neighborhood groups from Beverly Crest all the way to the Hollywood Hills. They started showing up at city council meetings, and they were demanding that something be done. They were saying, enough is enough. We need real, strong controls on this out-of-control development.
And, well, eventually, the city had to listen. This brings us to the official response: a set of new rules that would completely change the development game in Los Angeles. The Baseline Mansionization Ordinance, or BMO, and the Baseline Hillside Ordinance, the BHO.
This seal, right here, it represents a huge philosophical shift for the city. For years, developers had become absolute masters at exploiting loopholes in the zoning code. They'd use things like high ceiling bonuses, garage exemptions, all kinds of creative interpretations to build way bigger than the rules ever intended. So the city was now formally stepping in to slam those loopholes shut, and in doing so, they were signaling that the era of unchecked building was officially coming to an end.
But this timeline shows you that this didn't happen overnight. Not at all. This was a long, hard-fought battle. The process really started way back in 2006. In 2008, the city passed the first BMO. Then, in 2011, they added the BHO for the hillsides. But even that wasn't enough. Developers just kept finding new loopholes, so the city had to start issuing these temporary emergency restrictions called interim control ordinances, starting in 2015. They were basically freezing development in certain areas while they scrambled to write even stricter permanent rules.
So what were these new laws really designed to do? Well, they had four main goals. First, to directly attack the out-of-scale development problem by changing the math on how big a house could be. Second, to control construction impacts, especially in those very delicate and difficult hillside areas. Third, to just update the fundamental rules on the size and bulk of new homes. And finally, and this is the absolute key for a project like the one, to seriously tighten the rules on grading, which means how much earth you're physically allowed to dig up and haul away from a hillside lot.
And all of that brings us right back to our main example. You see, the one was dreamed up and started before these much stricter rules were fully in place. It was grandfathered in under the old, much looser system. And because of that, it became this living, breathing monument to an era of development that is now officially and legally over. This quote from an agent who was trying to sell the property, well, it's not just sales talk, it's a statement of legal fact. The very thing that made the one so spectacular, its incredible scale, which was only possible because they moved a mountain of dirt, is now impossible to do again. Under the current Baseline Hillside Ordinance, you just can't get the permits to move that much earth or to build a 100,000 square foot home on a hillside. The rules have completely changed the game. So, these few remaining mega mansions have basically become an endangered species. They're artifacts, relics of a very specific moment in LA history where ambition, global money, and loose regulations all lined up perfectly. They are the last of the dinosaurs. But as we're about to find out, the story doesn't just end when the construction stops. In fact, that's often when a whole new kind of nightmare begins.
So now we're going to pivot to the other side of this story. The city put rules in place to stop the physical impact of these homes, but the market and the courts are now creating their own brutal kind of regulation on the finances. See, building the dream is one thing, paying for it is something else entirely. And when the numbers are this big, the financial and legal risks become just as massive. Before we continue, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide.
To really understand this financial fragility, we're going to look at a different property now. This is a historic estate in the Silver Lake neighborhood called the Paramount. Now, it's not a modern mega mansion, but its legal battle in bankruptcy court is this incredible window into the shaky finances that hold up all of these ultra-luxury homes. It shows you just how fast the dream can fall apart. So here was the situation. The owner of the Paramore was in bankruptcy and desperately needed a new $7 million loan to keep the property from being sold off. But to get that emergency loan, the new lender demanded to be first in line to get paid back.
This is called a priming loan, and it meant that an existing creditor, a company called Bob's LLC, would get pushed from their safe second-place spot down to a much, much riskier third place. So the court had to answer a really critical question. Is that fair?
And this brings us to this amazing legal term, the indubitable equivalent. It's a fantastic phrase that sets an incredibly high bar. To approve this new loan and knock the old creditor down a peg, the judge had to be absolutely positive, with evidence too evident to be doubted, that the creditor's new, riskier third-place position was just as safe as their old second-place one. It's basically the court asking, are we 100% sure this original lender isn't going to get burned?
And this gets right to the heart of the problem. What was the property actually worth? The entire case hinged on this one question. The owner claimed the Paramore was worth a cool $40 million, but the creditor, Bob's LLC, had appraisals valuing it somewhere between $12 and $17 million. I mean, that's not just a disagreement, that is a canyon. We're talking about a valuation gap of over $20 million on a single property.
The judge in this case leaned heavily on this quote from a previous court opinion, and it's such a critical point. Valuing these unique, one-of-a-kind properties is incredibly hard. It is not an exact science. You can't just look up what similar homes sold for when there are no similar homes. Every one of these historic estates and modern megamansions is different, and their true value is, as the court said, pretty much impossible to know for sure until the day someone actually writes a check for it.
So the judge just did the math himself. He ran two scenarios. In the first one, without the new loan, the creditor had a nice, healthy $9.5 million equity cushion protecting their investment. But in scenario 2, with the new loan shoved in front of them, that cushion is completely gone. In fact, if the property's value dipped a bit, they're now looking at a potential $2.8 million loss. Their position was clearly and without a doubt much riskier.
And that led to the final, clear-cut conclusion. The judge denied the motion. A third lien in this high-stakes world was not even close to being the indubitable equivalent of a second lien. The risk was just too high, and the valuation was way too uncertain. The owner's dream of a last-minute financial rescue was over. All because the numbers, under the harsh light of the court, just didn't add up. So, where does all this leave us? We've seen the spectacle of the one, we've seen the neighborhood backlash that led to strict new laws, and we've seen the immense financial fragility that was exposed in the bankruptcy of the Paramore. It all points to a brand new reality for luxury real estate in Los Angeles.
This really recaps the whole four-act story of the megamansion, doesn't it? It starts with unprecedented spectacle, which leads to neighborhood backlash, which then forces strict city regulation, all happening under the constant shadow of extreme financial risk. It's a cautionary tale that is played out on the hillsides and in the courtrooms of Los Angeles.
So here's the bottom line. The era of building homes on the scale of the one in Los Angeles is over. The city's regulations have made sure of that. But the story isn't finished. The financial and legal fallout from these last few incredible properties, that's still playing out. The one itself went through a messy bankruptcy and ended up selling at auction for a tiny fraction of its original asking price. The final bill for this era of excess, it seems, has yet to be fully paid. And this really leaves us with one final big question. In a world with all these new rules and immense risks, what does the future of extreme luxury even look like? If you can't build bigger anymore, does luxury become about quality, about technology, about sustainability? Or do the ultra-wealthy just pack up their ambitions and their capital and move to other cities with fewer rules? It's something to think about. And that wraps up our deep dive. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide.